My name is Ryan Walker, and for almost 4 years I worked the night shift as the only broadcast technician at WBRK radio station, a forgotten AM station hidden deep in the forests outside Blackridge County. During the day, the building looked harmless. A small brick station with faded white walls, an old transmission tower stretching into the sky, and a parking lot that was almost always empty. Local farmers still listened to the weather reports every morning, but after midnight, there were no scheduled programs. My entire job was simple: keep the transmitter running, monitor the equipment, and make sure nothing failed before sunrise. When I accepted the job, the pay seemed too good for such easy work. 8-hour shifts, no customers, no co-workers after midnight. Just me, a control room filled with aging equipment, and miles of quiet forest surrounding the station. During orientation, the station manager, Mr. Hargrove, showed me everything I needed to know. He explained how to monitor the signal, restart the backup generators, and switch to emergency power if lightning struck the transmission tower. He answered every question patiently. Then, just before leaving, he handed me an old brass key. "This doesn't open anything anymore," he said. "Then why do I need it?" He stared toward the hallway leading deeper into the building. "In case you ever find Studio 6. I laughed. I thought there were only 5 studios. "There are." He didn't smile. "Unless you're here after 3:13. I waited for the joke. It never came. Instead, he looked directly into my eyes. "If you ever hear someone broadcasting from Studio 6, do not answer the voice." Those were the last words he said before walking out of the building. My first week passed without anything unusual happening. Every night followed the exact same routine. 11 p.m. Check the transmitter. Inspect the backup generators. Monitor the broadcast frequency. Drink terrible coffee. Wait for sunrise. The station was incredibly quiet. Sometimes I could hear rain hitting the roof. Sometimes wind rattled the old windows. Sometimes coyotes howled somewhere beyond the trees. But that was all, until my 8th shift. At exactly 3:13 a.m., every monitor inside the control room suddenly filled with static. The speakers produced a loud burst of white noise before going completely silent. Then, a man's voice calmly said, "Good evening." I nearly dropped my coffee. The microphone in front of me was switched off. No pre-recorded programs were scheduled. No other employee should have been inside the building. Yet someone was clearly speaking through our transmitter. The voice sounded old, not elderly, just exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in years. My name. A burst of static interrupted him. "If anyone can hear this." More static. "Please don't let them turn off the signal." The broadcast ended. Every monitor instantly returned to normal. I checked the transmission logs. Nothing. According to the computers, no broadcast had happened. No audio had been transmitted. No frequency had changed. Everything appeared perfectly normal. I spent the next hour convincing myself I'd imagined it. Maybe interference. Maybe equipment failure. Maybe I had simply been tired. The following night, at exactly 3:13 a.m., the same thing happened. The lights dimmed. The speakers hissed. Then the same voice returned. I know someone is listening. This time he sounded closer, almost as if he were standing inside the room with me. I've been alone for 37 years. The transmission cut off again. I immediately searched every room inside the station. Studio 1, empty. Studio 2, locked. Studio 3, nothing. Studio 4, dark. Studio 5, completely abandoned. There was no Studio 6. Not on the map. Not on the emergency plans. Not anywhere inside the building. The next morning, I asked one of the daytime engineers if he'd ever heard of Studio 6. He froze, just for a second. Then he quietly asked, "You heard the broadcast?" I nodded. He slowly packed his tools back into his bag. "I don't work nights anymore." "Why?" He looked toward the hallway behind me. "Because eventually, it starts saying your name." Then he walked away without another word. The engineer's words stayed in my head for the rest of the day. Eventually, it starts saying your name. I kept telling myself he was just another old employee trying to scare the new guy. Every workplace has people like that. The longer I thought about it, the more ridiculous it sounded. A ghost radio station? A hidden studio? Voices that only appeared at 3:13 in the morning? By the time my next shift started, I had convinced myself it was nothing more than faulty equipment. At 10:55 p.m., I unlocked the front entrance and stepped inside. The station was unusually cold. The air conditioning wasn't running. The thermostat on the wall read 24 degrees Celsius, yet my breath was visible every time I exhaled. I walked through the building checking every room. Everything looked exactly the same as always. Old recording booths, dusty microphones, stacks of cassette tapes no one had touched in decades. The smell of old paper, electronics, and coffee filled the hallways. Nothing felt wrong until 3:13 a.m. The digital clock above the mixing console changed from 3:12 to 3:13. Instantly, every light inside the building dimmed. Not completely, just enough for the room to feel different. The equipment powered on by itself. Meters began moving. Buttons lit up. One microphone. The oldest microphone in the control room. Its red-on-air light suddenly turned on. I hadn't touched it. The speakers filled with static. Then, the same exhausted voice returned. "I know you're still there." This time, he sounded relieved. "As long as someone listens, I still exist." I slowly reached toward the console. Every instinct told me to switch the microphone off. Before my hand reached the button, the station phone rang. I jumped. Nobody ever called after midnight. The caller ID showed only one word. Internal. There wasn't an internal phone system anymore. It had been disconnected years ago. The phone kept ringing. I finally answered. "Hello." Silence. Then, my own voice answered. "Ryan, I nearly dropped the receiver. It sounded exactly like me. Not similar. Perfect. Don't answer him. The line went dead. At the exact same moment, the broadcast continued. He doesn't want you to hear the truth. I slowly looked around the control room. Nobody was there. The voice calmly continued speaking. I used to work here. I was the night technician. I thought I was alone too. A loud burst of static interrupted him. When it faded, he quietly finished the sentence. Until I found Studio 6. The lights flickered violently. Every monitor inside the control room switched from the audio interface to the building's security cameras. Camera 1. Front entrance. Empty. Camera 2. Parking lot. Empty. Camera 3. Main hallway. I froze. There was someone standing in the hallway. A man wearing headphones. His back faced the camera. He wasn't moving. I immediately grabbed my flashlight and rushed into the corridor. Nobody. The hallway was completely empty. I looked back toward the control room. The monitors still showed the man, standing exactly where I had just been. He slowly lifted one hand and pointed deeper into the building, toward a solid brick wall at the very end of the hallway, a wall I had walked past every night. The camera suddenly filled with static. When the picture returned, the man was gone. The wall wasn't a wall anymore. A narrow wooden door stood there instead. Above it, a faded metal sign covered in dust. Studio 6. I stood there staring at the monitor. The door was impossible. I had walked past that wall every single night. There had never been a door, never a hallway, never a sign. Yet now the faded metal plate clearly read, Studio 6. I looked away from the monitor and shined my flashlight toward the end of the real hallway. The brick wall was still there, solid, exactly as it had always been. I slowly looked back at the screen. The wall was gone again. Only the old wooden door remained. The camera wasn't glitching anymore. The image was perfectly clear. A long silence filled the control room. Finally, the broadcast returned. If you can see the door, it's already too late. The voice no longer sounded exhausted. It sounded afraid, genuinely afraid. You have to leave. I stepped away from the monitors. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it over the static. This had gone far beyond broken equipment. Someone had either hacked the entire station, or something inside this building wanted me to see that door. The station phone rang again. One ring, then another. I refused to answer. It kept ringing. Finally, it stopped. A second later, every phone inside the building began ringing. The office phone, the emergency phone, the recording studio phones, even the old rotary phones sitting in the storage room that hadn't been connected in decades. Their ringing echoed through the empty station. One after another, none of them rang together. Each one waited until another stopped, as if something was walking from room to room, picking up every receiver. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly stepped into the hallway. The ringing continued somewhere ahead, then behind me, then upstairs. The building suddenly felt much larger than it should have. I followed the sound until I reached the end of the corridor. The brick wall stood exactly where it always had. No door, no sign, nothing. I touched the bricks. Cold, solid, real. The ringing stopped. Complete silence. Then, a slow creaking noise echoed directly behind the wall, like an old wooden door opening. My flashlight flickered. A narrow line appeared between two rows of bricks. I blinked. The crack became wider. Dust slowly fell onto the floor. The bricks weren't moving. They were sliding apart, very slowly, as if the wall itself had become two enormous hidden doors. I couldn't move. The opening widened until I could finally see inside. There really was another hallway. Old wooden floorboards, yellow ceiling lights, walls covered with faded acoustic panels. It looked nothing like the rest of the radio station. This part of the building looked untouched since the 1980s. At the far end stood another door, this one made of thick soundproof glass. Above it, a bright red on-air sign glowed. I slowly stepped closer. The air smelled strange. Old cigarette smoke, warm electronics, dust, as though people had been working there only minutes earlier. Then I heard voices, not from the broadcast, from inside the hidden hallway. People talking quietly, someone laughing, papers shuffling, a chair rolling across the floor. It sounded like a normal radio station during a live show. I reached the glass door. The sign above it clearly read, Studio 6. The room beyond was brightly lit. Microphones, mixing consoles, headphones, coffee cups. Everything looked ready for another broadcast. Except, every chair was empty. The voices continued anyway. Someone was speaking into a microphone that nobody occupied. Then, without warning, one of the office chairs slowly turned by itself, very slowly, facing me. The microphone in front of it clicked on. The red recording light illuminated the room. A calm voice came through the studio speakers. Ryan, you finally found us. Then every light inside Studio 6 shut off. Except one, the red on-air sign. It remained glowing above the darkness. And from somewhere inside that black room, I heard someone quietly stand up. The chair stopped moving. It faced directly toward the glass, toward me. The room beyond the window had become completely black except for the glowing red on-air sign hanging from the ceiling. I couldn't see whoever had stood up, but I knew someone was there. The silence lasted nearly 15 seconds. Then, a microphone inside Studio 6 slowly lowered by itself. The metal arm creaked as it moved. It stopped exactly where someone's mouth should have been. Click. The microphone switched on. A deep breath echoed through every speaker in the hallway. Not loud, just one slow inhale, like someone preparing to speak after remaining silent for years. Then, Ryan. The voice was different now. No longer frightened. No longer exhausted. Calm. Patient. You came much sooner than I did. My entire body locked in place. Who are you? Static crackled. Then the answer came. My name was Thomas Reed. I worked the night shift here in 1987. I remembered that name. Only a few days earlier I'd seen it on an old employee photograph hanging in the lobby. Thomas Reed. Missing. Presumed dead. Never found. My flashlight suddenly flickered toward the wall beside the studio window. Framed photographs covered the hallway. Dozens of them. I'd never seen this corridor before. Every picture showed old radio station employees standing together. Different years. Different uniforms. Different faces. One thing immediately caught my attention. Every single group photo contained one empty chair. Always the same chair. Always in the middle. Almost as if someone had been removed from every photograph. I stepped closer. The final photograph hung separately from the others. 1987. The night staff. Thomas Reed stood smiling beside the mixing console. I counted the employees. 6. But there were 7 name tags beneath the frame. The final tag had been scratched away. Only the first few letters remained. Re. My stomach tightened. That couldn't be possible. The picture had been taken decades before I was born. Behind me, the studio microphone clicked again. Don't look at the photographs. Too late. The flashlight beam moved across another frame. This one was dated 2004. Again, 6 people. 7 name tags. One scratched away. Another. 2013. The same. Then, 2022. I froze. This photograph wasn't old. It had been taken only 3 years ago. The faces looked modern. The equipment inside the picture matched the station exactly as it looked today. 6 employees smiled toward the camera. One empty chair sat in the center. The scratched name beneath it hadn't been completely removed. I could still read part of it. Ryan Walker. My blood turned cold. The picture already included me. I had never seen it before. I had never taken it. I had never even met those people. Yet there I was, standing beside the empty chair, smiling directly at the camera. Slowly, the version of me inside the photograph lifted its head. Every other person remained frozen. Only I moved. The photograph smiled, then raised one finger, pointing toward the studio window. A loud knock exploded against the glass. Not 3 knocks, just one, so powerful the entire window shook. I spun around, standing inside Studio 6. Only inches from the glass was a man wearing old broadcast headphones. His face was completely hidden by darkness, but I could clearly see one thing. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the reflection standing behind me. My blood froze. Very slowly, I turned around. The hallway behind me was empty. No footsteps. No shadows. Nothing. I looked back at the studio window. The man was still standing there, completely motionless. Then he slowly raised one hand. Instead of pointing at me, he pointed down, at the floor. Confused, I lowered my flashlight. Fresh footprints. Wet footprints. They hadn't been there a second earlier. They began only a few inches behind my shoes, as if someone had been standing directly behind me the entire time. The footprints continued down the hidden hallway, toward Studio 6, not away from it, toward it. I looked at the reflection in the glass. For a split second, I saw another figure standing beside me. Tall, thin, wearing the same headphones as the man inside the studio. I spun around instantly. The hallway remained empty. When I looked back, the man behind the glass was gone. The studio was dark again. Then, the on-air sign blinked twice. A cassette player somewhere inside the room suddenly clicked. The speakers crackled. Instead of the man's voice, a recording began playing. The sound quality was terrible, old, distorted, like it had been recorded on tape decades ago. A calm voice spoke. Night shift log. October 18th, 1987. My name is Thomas Reed. If anyone finds these recordings, do not enter Studio 6. The tape hissed loudly, then continued. It isn't another room. It isn't another studio. It's listening. I don't know how long it's been here. I don't know where it came from. But every night, someone disappears. My flashlight flickered again. The hallway suddenly felt colder. The recording continued. At first it copies voices, then faces, then memories. Eventually, you stop remembering which ones belong to you. A loud bang echoed somewhere deeper inside the hidden corridor. Not from Studio 6. Farther in, there were more rooms beyond it. Rooms that shouldn't have existed. The tape continued. If you're hearing this, I've already failed. Another burst of static. Then Thomas whispered one final sentence. It doesn't trap people. It replaces them. The cassette stopped. Silence. Then, every framed photograph hanging along the hallway fell from the walls at the exact same moment. Glass shattered across the wooden floor. I instinctively stepped backward. My flashlight landed on one broken frame. The 2022 photograph. It had changed. The empty chair was gone. Someone now sat there. Me. Only. I wasn't smiling anymore. I was staring directly at the camera. My eyes were completely black. Beneath the photograph, the scratched name had returned. Ryan Walker, night technician, 1987, present. I stumbled backwards so hard I hit the opposite wall. No, I whispered. This isn't real. Then, the old station speakers hidden in the ceiling turned on. Not just one, all of them. A cheerful radio host began speaking as if a live morning show had just started. good evening, listeners. Welcome back to WBRK. We're happy to introduce our newest night host. A long pause followed. Then every speaker in the building announced my name. Ryan Walker. You're living 5, 4, 3, 2. The red on air sign above Studio 6 suddenly glowed brighter than ever before. Then, the studio door slowly unlocked by itself. The lock clicked. Once, then again. The heavy studio door slowly drifted open. No one touched it. A warm orange light spilled into the hallway, completely different from the cold fluorescent lighting in the rest of the station. It looked inviting, comfortable, like an ordinary radio studio preparing for another late-night broadcast. The red on air sign glowed brighter. My legs refused to move. The voice from the ceiling calmly counted down. 5, 4, 3. Every clock inside the hidden hallway stopped at exactly 3:13 a.m. Even my wristwatch. Its second hand froze in place. The countdown continued. 2. The microphone inside Studio 6 switched on by itself. Headphones resting on the desk slowly slid across the wooden surface until they stopped at the empty chair. Waiting. For you. The ceiling speakers whispered. 1. Silence. The room remained perfectly still. Nothing happened. I slowly exhaled. Then every piece of equipment inside Studio 6 powered on simultaneously. Old tape machines began spinning. Meters started dancing. Static hissed through the speakers. One monitor lit up. Then another. Then another. Every screen showed the exact same image. Me, standing in the doorway. Except, the version on the monitors wasn't copying my movements anymore. I remained frozen. The version inside the screen slowly smiled. Then it stepped forward. Not inside the room. Inside the monitor. It kept walking until it disappeared beyond the edge of the screen. A second later, something gently tapped my shoulder. One tap. I spun around. Nobody. The hallway behind me remained empty. When I turned back, someone was sitting in the broadcast chair. The headphones covered his ears. His back faced me. He quietly adjusted one of the microphones. The chair slowly rotated. My heartbeat nearly stopped. It wasn't Thomas. It wasn't the shadow from the glass. It was me. Exactly me. Same haircut. Same jacket. Same flashlight hanging from my belt. Every detail was perfect. The other Ryan smiled. You finally made it. His voice sounded exactly like mine. I couldn't speak. He looked toward the microphone. You've been listening to my broadcasts all week. I've been trying to warn you. What are you talking about? He sighed. The same thing happened to me. I heard a voice. I found this studio. I thought I could leave. He slowly removed one headphone. I never did. I stared at him. No. He nodded. I'm the Ryan who accepted this job. My stomach twisted. What does that make me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly reached beneath the desk, pulled out an employee file, placed it on the console. The folder already had my photograph attached to it. Only, the hiring date wasn't this year. It read, October 18th, 1987. No, I whispered. This is impossible. The other Ryan quietly smiled. I said the same thing. Then he looked directly into my eyes. Tell me something. What was your first memory before coming to Blackridge? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I tried again. I remembered school, friends, my apartment, driving to work. But before that, nothing. It was as if my life simply started. The other Ryan saw the realization on my face. You can't remember, because those memories were never yours. The lights inside Studio 6 suddenly dimmed. Somewhere deeper inside the building, a slow knock echoed through the walls. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from another studio farther down the hidden hallway. A studio with a faded sign hanging above the door. Studio 7. I stared at the sign for several seconds. Studio 7. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. There isn't supposed to be another studio, I whispered. The other Ryan slowly nodded. There wasn't. Not when I first got here. He stood up from the broadcast chair. The movement was unnaturally slow, almost like he had forgotten how to walk. When I arrived, there was only Studio 6. He looked toward the darkness at the end of the hallway. A year later, Studio 7 appeared. My stomach tightened. What happens when another studio appears? His smile disappeared. It means another technician stayed too long. The air inside the hidden corridor suddenly became colder. Not freezing. Heavy. Like breathing underwater. A faint humming noise echoed somewhere beyond Studio 7. It sounded almost identical to a radio transmission searching for a signal. Then, another red light flickered farther down the corridor. I aimed my flashlight toward it. There, barely visible through the darkness, was another sign. Studio 8. No, I whispered. The other Ryan closed his eyes. It grows. Every person it keeps becomes another room. My flashlight shook violently in my hand. How many people? He slowly pointed deeper into the darkness. I followed his finger. The hallway stretched far beyond what should have been possible. It didn't end. Every few meters, another faint red light glowed above another door. Studio 9, Studio 10, Studio 11, Studio 12. I couldn't even see where the corridor ended. There were hundreds, maybe thousands, each one quietly glowing in the darkness. Every on-air sign was illuminated. Every studio, still broadcasting. A cold chill ran down my spine. The station above only had 5 rooms. Yet beneath it, there seemed to be an endless radio station buried under the earth. Then, every on-air sign lit up brighter at exactly the same moment. One after another, like dominoes, the red lights raced through the corridor until every hidden studio glowed simultaneously. Then, voices, hundreds of voices, men, women, young, old, every one of them calmly speaking into microphones. Different conversations, different broadcasts, different years. All at once, the sound became unbearable. My ears rang. I dropped to one knee. The other Ryan didn't react. He simply listened. They're still working. What? They never stop broadcasting. They don't know they're dead. I slowly looked toward him. What happens if someone answers? His expression changed. For the first time, he looked genuinely terrified. They hear you. Who? He slowly pointed into the darkness. Not toward any studio. Far beyond them. Somewhere deeper. There are listeners. The humming suddenly stopped. Every voice cut off at once. Silence. Complete silence. Then, one microphone somewhere far down the endless hallway clicked on. Only one. A deep voice calmly echoed through every hidden studio. Ryan Walker. It wasn't asking. It wasn't greeting me. It was confirming my name. The other Ryan slowly stepped backward. His face had gone pale. It found you. What found me? He looked directly into my eyes. The audience. At that exact second, every studio door in the endless hallway slowly opened together. Hundreds of doors. All at once. No footsteps came from inside. No voices. Only darkness. Watching. Waiting. Then every single on-air sign suddenly switched off, leaving only one glowing. Studio 6. The room where I was standing. The microphone in front of me quietly turned toward my face. The speakers crackled. Then a calm voice whispered only one sentence. Your show is about to begin. The microphone stopped moving. It was now pointed directly at my face. Every instinct told me to run, to get out of the hidden hallway, to leave the station forever. But my feet refused to move. The deep voice echoed through Studio 6 once more. Your audience has been waiting. The red on-air sign flashed 3 times. Then every piece of equipment inside the room came alive. Tape reels spun. Meters jumped wildly. Static poured from every speaker. A bright red recording light illuminated the microphone. The other Ryan slowly stepped away from the console. I have to go. What? It's your turn now. He sounded almost relieved. Wait. Tell me how to stop this. He looked at me sadly. I asked the same question, and no one answered. His body slowly began fading, not disappearing instantly, little by little, like an old radio signal losing reception. Within seconds, only his outline remained. Before vanishing completely, he whispered, "Don't let them hear your voice." Then he was gone, The broadcast console immediately beeped. A digital timer appeared on one of the monitors. 0:59. It began counting down. 58. 57. 56. What is this? No answer. The timer continued. 52. 51. Then the speakers turned on again. Only this time, I didn't hear voices. I heard my own heartbeat. Loud. Clear. Every beat echoed through Studio 6. Then my breathing. Every nervous breath. The microphone wasn't recording sound. It was recording me. The timer reached 45 seconds. The station phone suddenly rang. Not somewhere else. The phone sitting directly beside the mixing console. I hesitated. It kept ringing. Finally, I answered. Hello. A woman quietly replied. Please don't speak again. The line immediately went dead. My stomach dropped. I had already spoken. The timer instantly skipped ahead. 0:21. What? The numbers continued falling faster now. 20. 19. 18. The lights dimmed. The temperature plummeted. Every monitor switched from the countdown to live video feeds. Except they weren't showing the station anymore. Each screen showed a different living room, different houses, different apartments, families sleeping peacefully, children watching television, people eating dinner, ordinary lives. I frowned. What am I looking at? A sentence slowly appeared beneath every screen. Current listeners. The number kept increasing. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Thousands. More and more people were somehow tuning into a broadcast that didn't officially exist. Then, every person on every monitor suddenly stopped moving. Every single one. They all slowly turned their heads, looking directly toward their televisions, toward their radios, toward me. The timer reached 10 seconds. A deep mechanical voice filled the room. Broadcast begins in 10, 9, 8. Every monitor showed the listeners smiling. 7, 6. Their smiles became wider. 5, 4. Their eyes turned completely black. 3, 2. The microphone slowly floated upward until it stopped only inches from my mouth. 1. The red on-air light became blindingly bright. Then, the monitor flashed a single message. Speak. And from somewhere beyond Studio 7, something enormous, slowly inhaled. I couldn't breathe. The microphone hovered inches from my face. The message on the monitor never changed. Speak. The entire station waited. The listeners on every screen stared without blinking. Thousands of black eyes. Thousands of identical smiles. Then, the enormous thing somewhere beyond Studio 7 exhaled. The sound shook the entire hidden hallway. It wasn't human. It wasn't even an animal. It sounded like an entire tunnel breathing. The vibration knocked me backward. The microphone crashed onto the desk. The red on-air light flickered. For the first time since entering Studio 6, the countdown disappeared. Every monitor went black. A voice quietly whispered behind me. Good. I spun around. Captain Lewis stood in the doorway. His uniform was torn. Blood covered one side of his face. He looked exhausted, but alive. Captain. He immediately raised one finger. Quiet. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. It can only hear broadcasts, never conversations. I stared at him. I thought you were dead. I almost was. He slowly closed the studio door. The lock clicked. For the first time all night, the room became silent. Lewis walked toward the old broadcast desk. He carefully removed one cassette hidden beneath the console. The tape was covered with dust. Across the label, someone had written one sentence by hand. Final transmission. I've spent 20 years looking for this. What is it? The last recording ever made inside Studio 6. He inserted the cassette into the player. Nothing happened. He looked at me. It only works if the next technician starts it. I don't understand. You were chosen. I wasn't. You were. He pressed the play button. The cassette began spinning. Static filled the speakers. Then an old recording started. A man's terrified voice echoed through the room. If you're hearing this, I'm already gone. My name is Thomas Reed. I finally know what Studio 6 is. It isn't a room. It isn't even inside this building. It's a broadcast. The tape crackled loudly. A signal that has been transmitting for longer than this station has existed. Lewis slowly nodded. I knew it. Thomas continued. Every person who hears the full broadcast becomes part of it. They don't die. They keep broadcasting forever. I slowly remembered the endless hallway, the hundreds of studios, the voices. They're all trapped. Lewis whispered. Thomas continued speaking. I tried destroying the equipment. It rebuilt itself. I tried burning the studio. The fire only spread the signal. I tried leaving. I always woke up back inside. The tape suddenly skipped. Then Thomas spoke much more quietly. There is only one way. If the broadcast is interrupted before the audience hears a complete transmission, the signal loses its host. Lewis looked directly at me. That's why it wanted your voice. It needed a new host. My mouth went dry. So if I had spoken, he nodded, you would have replaced Thomas. The cassette hissed violently. Thomas's breathing became uneven. I can hear it outside the door. It's coming. If someone finds this, don't finish the broadcast. The recording abruptly stopped. Silence. Lewis slowly ejected the cassette. His hands trembled. We still have a chance. How? He pointed toward the hallway. We destroy the transmitter. The real one. I frowned. The tower outside? Lewis slowly shook his head. No. He looked toward the endless darkness beyond Studio 7. The first transmitter. The one still broadcasting. It isn't above the station. His face became completely pale. It's underneath it. At that exact moment, every light inside Studio 6 turned off. Only the red on air sign remained glowing. Then, from somewhere beneath the floor, an old elevator bell rang. Neither of us had ever seen an elevator inside the building. The wooden floor slowly split apart. A rusted metal elevator rose from the darkness below. Its ancient doors slid open. Inside, only one button existed. Transmitter LEVL. The elevator doors stood open. A cold wind drifted upward from the darkness below. It smelled like burned wires, damp concrete, and something much older, something that had been sealed underground for decades. Neither of us moved. Captain Lewis stared at the single button inside the elevator. Transmitter level. There was never an elevator on the blueprints. I whispered. There wasn't, Lewis replied. It only appears when the signal is ready. I looked at him. Ready for what? He answered without hesitation. To choose. The lights inside Studio 6 suddenly flashed again. Every monitor powered on. Not showing cameras. Not showing listeners. Only one sentence appeared across every screen. Final host required. The words vanished. The speakers crackled. Then thousands of voices spoke at exactly the same time. Ryan. Their whispers overlapped until they became impossible to understand. Some cried. Some laughed. Some begged. Some simply repeated my name over and over. Lewis grabbed my arm. We don't have much time. We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed immediately behind us. No buttons. No controls. Only the single brass plate reading transmitter level. Without warning, the elevator dropped. Not slowly. Not like any normal elevator. It felt as if the cables had snapped. The floor disappeared beneath my feet. Everything became weightless. The lights flickered violently. The speakers inside the elevator came alive. Old radio broadcasts played one after another. Weather reports, news, music, emergency alerts, voices from different decades, different languages, different years, all overlapping. Then, every recording suddenly stopped. One calm voice replaced them all. Welcome back. The elevator slammed to a stop. The doors slowly opened. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. It wasn't a basement. It wasn't another studio. It was an enormous underground chamber stretching farther than my flashlight could reach. Thousands of old radio towers rose from the floor like metal trees. Some were broken. Some leaned sideways. Some still glowed with tiny red warning lights. Hundreds of thick cables disappeared into the darkness above. In the center of the chamber stood a massive transmission machine unlike anything I'd ever seen. It looked ancient, older than electricity itself. Copper coils, rusted gears, glass vacuum tubes glowing faint orange. Thousands of wires connected every hidden studio to the enormous machine, and sitting directly in front of it was a wooden broadcast desk. A single microphone rested on top. The red on-air light above it was already glowing. Captain Lewis whispered, "This is where it started. When no one knows." He slowly walked toward the machine. The radio station wasn't built over empty land. It was built to hide this. I followed him carefully. The machine hummed quietly. Its rhythm sounded disturbingly familiar, like breathing. Then I noticed the wall behind it. Photographs. Thousands of photographs. Every missing night technician. Every missing engineer. Every missing security guard. Every photograph had the same words written beneath it. Current host. The final photograph was empty. Only a blank frame remained. Beneath it, a freshly engraved brass nameplate waited. It already read, "Ryan Walker." Before I could react, the entire chamber shook. Every radio tower lit up simultaneously. The massive transmitter roared to life. The microphone on the wooden desk switched itself on. A deep voice echoed through the underground chamber. Not angry, not loud, certain. The broadcast must continue. Captain Lewis looked at me. His expression told me everything. Only one of us was leaving Blackridge alive.